I get up, time is barely on our side. I don't wanna waste what's left. The storms we chase are leading us, and love is all we'll ever trust. Yeah, no, I don't wanna waste what's left. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go. Through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go. Turn us to thousands, and we'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon. Turn us to thousands, and on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go.
Fill me out with your smile. Now the sunshine brings the light. Fill me out with a flame. I will let you in this game. Take me out when I'm down. 'Cause with you I'm safe and sound. 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 I'm safe and sound.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody that's joining us here today. Today is our first of 4 Global Packaging Forum sessions that we're really excited to bring you on behalf of the Australian Institute of Packaging and Informal Markets. This is our second annual Global Packaging Forum. This year is a little bit different, as you can see, because we are doing a virtual edition. And fingers crossed, next year we'll be back with you live at ProPack Asia. Now, before I start today's session, I would like to do a little bit of an introduction on what the 4 sessions will be for the next 4 days. Today, we're going to talk about how to achieve global and regional packaging targets for the ASEAN region. And we have 3 fabulous speakers with us today that are covering global trends and challenges. Tomorrow, we're looking at how to balance sustainable packaging and food waste targets. On the 3rd day of the Global Packaging Forum, we're covering circular and sustainable packaging design for the future. And on the 4th day, we're looking at reusable and refillable packaging designs for the future. So today's session, how to achieve global and regional packaging targets. The packaging industry is facing many challenges at the moment with global plastic pollution and recycling issues and transformational changes to value and supply chain models, resulting in negative government and consumer perceptions. These challenges are requiring packaging companies, manufacturers and retailers to rethink their approaches and undertake strategic changes to address the challenges of meeting global and domestic packaging targets, plastics packs, extended producer responsibility directives, and more. Today's session will discuss the targets and what the industry is working towards to ensure that packaging is circular by design and sustainable, reusable, recyclable, and has the lowest environmental impact possible. So before we introduce our first speaker, I'd like to hand over to the facilitator for today, Mr. Ralph Moyle. Ralph Moyle is our Education Coordinator of the Australian Institute of Packaging. And Ralph has also had the pleasure of physically attending the Global Packaging Forum with myself and Pierre last year. And I'm going to hand over to Ralph, who will introduce the first speaker for today.
Okay, I think we're clear now. Thank you, Nerida, for that very fine introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to ProPack Asia 2020. It's a little bit different from what it's been in the past, but we're still here to provide you with a whole range of educational topics throughout this week. The first presenter I would like to bring forward is Professor Pierre Pienard from the World Packaging Organization. Pierre, if you would please come online. Pierre, do we have you there?
Not far away, Ralph.
At last, we've got him. Thank you. Thank you. I was getting worried. Thank you.
But you know, Ralph, it's a long way from Thailand to Australia. That's why the delay.
Of course. Thank you.
Ralph, just checking if my screen is up. Well, thank you very much for that intro, and it's wonderful for me to be part of this program today. It's an exciting program. There's lots happening around the world, and I'm going to share with you just a snapshot of what is happening in terms of the global packaging targets. So, plastic has its place, but that place is simply not in our environment. And so, yes, plastic certainly has a fantastic use and is part of the solution. It's not part of the problem. And I'll elaborate on that in a moment. But what we need to do is ensure that plastic stays part of a recycling program. And in that way, we can ensure that it stays out of our environment, but that it's kept in the place where it should be, and that is in food safety and quality and protecting foods and shelf life and all those good things. But we need to develop those solutions. And worldwide, that is happening. However, there are certain areas where it's not. And this is what we will focus on as well. So we need to increase the plastic recycling figures around the world. You can see there just a snapshot. It's around about just over the 30% mark globally. So that means 70% is being not recycled. And that's a bit of a problem. So let's have a look what has been achieved. It's easy focusing on the negatives, but let's have a look at the positives. From a WPO perspective, and I'll use that acronym a couple of times during this presentation, WPO standing for World Packaging Organization. So the World Packaging Organization, we set our targets in November of 2017 in Rio in Brazil, where we would focus on the reduction of food waste. We would focus on the reduction of packaging waste and increase the packaging awareness across the globe. So we need to look at the targets that various regions and countries are doing around the world, and also focus particularly on the development of mono-material packaging. And I have to say that in many areas, the wheels are starting to turn. But I also ask the listeners and the viewers that this doesn't happen overnight. But in the meantime, we're already setting our targets for 2021 and 2023 in relation to the WPO, and there we are focusing on the user perspective and those that are creating the packaging, putting more responsibility onto those particular areas. If one looks at this graph, which I really enjoy because it brings the message across quite clearly, and that is that just looking very briefly at this globe, you can see there are fruit and vegetables all over the world. But we also know that fruit and veggies are not grown in all regions around the world in all seasons of the year. However, we do know, for those who are traveling a lot across the globe, that we can have whatever we like in any country at any time. So if I'm in Europe in winter months, I can have bananas simply because of packaging. Packaging creates the opportunity of us to have whatever we want, anywhere, anytime. But unfortunately, that comes at a cost of increasing the amount of packaging that's required. And we've seen that in the recent 6, 7, 8 months of COVID-19, where across the world we are using more packaging than ever before, especially in the e-commerce field. So if we focus on reduction of food waste, just one of the things that we really push hard on, and that is we are in a joint program with Messe Düsseldorf, and that is in reduction of food waste. But in addition to that, we have a particular section of the World Star Awards program that focuses particularly on this aspect of packaging. And remember that those folk that win these awards are given the world stage to promote what they are doing and have done for saving food by the use of packaging. If one looks at what's happening around the world, and in particular the EU, because at the moment we watch very carefully what's happening in the EU, and we can see the EU targets for packaging. Now, we can see that 2025, there's certain targets, and in 2030, they are more pronounced and increased. Just to give you a snapshot, if the plastic waste by 2025 is 50%, at the moment, they are in the region of around 30 to 40% within the EU. If one looks at some other areas around the world, they can be as low as below 10%. The global figure is put at around 19% or 20% round figures, which makes it 1/5 of all plastic is being recycled. And you can also then look at the others and see what's happening in relation to the targets that are being set by the EU. So the other area that we focus on is sustainability, because if you have sustainability, then how do you achieve that? One of the ways is by recycling. And therefore we have a sustainable solution to not disrupting our natural resources the way we are at the moment. And that particular point I will be addressing towards the end of this presentation. But we in the WPO are 100% committed to sustainability. And again, these are the latest awards. That milk bottle on the right-hand side is the winner of the Gold Award in sustainability this year. And all kudos is given to them for what they've done in ensuring that they are a sustainable solution for rigid type packaging. We don't only focus on industry, we focus on students, simply because they are the future of our industry. And so we have a particular awards program for students called the World Star Student Awards Program. And yet in this particular slide, you can see where they are using banana skins and creating a polymer from that and using it in a snack solution. And so these students, in other words, our workforce of the future, they are being given a global platform to show what they are doing. And then what about sustainability in packaging in relation to fast-moving consumer goods companies? And I've only named a few, the largest FMCG companies. But what they are doing is they have clear sustainable goals in mind, and they are actioning because they are all working towards the same objective. But the consumers, they need to bring their part as well. That's you and I. We also need to play a very key role in that. In the same time, what about packaging converters? And again, I'm only taking a snapshot. Is Hutamaki doing fantastic work in relation to the circular economy and keeping product packaging in the continuous loop or circular economy. And likewise, Amcor, same story. Have pledged goals for 2025, and they are well on their way to achieving those goals. Now, we must also look at what about the consumer. Now, I have to say that in terms of the consumer, we have to ensure that we keep the plastic out of the oceans. We know that plastic is minimizing food loss, as you can see in the center two photos of the meat. It's extending shelf life. So those are all good things, and it helps us as the consumers. And then if we take the right-hand side, those are single-use plastics. And it is this area that we need to target. Us as consumers need to be aware of what we are buying and to ensure that we are using packaging that is kept in a recyclable format and not only a single use ending up in the waste streams of the world. We also need to just touch base, and because there are two issues, and that is packaging recyclability. In other words, is the material recyclable? And then what about recycling? And I showed some rates in the EU a moment ago. And so it's important to note that in terms of packaging recycling, United States is only doing 28%, Europe 40%, and Asia, it's not quite in place across the Asian region at the moment. And that's the target, because they are the target of this audience. There are many people that are listening in right now from Asia. And so we, the WPO, are doing an incredible amount of work within Asian countries, targeting and ensuring to implement the programs of recycling in Asia. And I'll touch on that again in a moment as well. However, I'm pleased to say that governments around the world are reacting. They are doing their thing. And I've given you a snapshot there of 6 areas and countries, just to tell you and bring to you what Australia is doing. They have a target of 100% packaging to be recyclable or compostable or reusable by 2025. In China, they ban limited imports of packaging waste, as many of you know, and they are proposing a ban on single-use plastics. In India, they're certainly pushing, but they're pushing more from an awareness campaign, other than from instead of a legislation aspect. But yet, at least things are being done from a government perspective around the world. In Thailand, there's a ban on single-use plastics that will come into effect in January 2021. So that's fantastic. Latin America, we are focusing in that area in our 2021 to 2023 programs of the WPO. And certainly from my perspective, as president of the WPO, is to work with India to come up with solutions that will enhance their recycling rates in that area. In the fast-moving consumer goods, in years gone by, they focused a lot on lightweighting, but they've moved beyond that now. And in many FMCGs, they are beyond what their country's targets are. They're doing even better, which is fantastic, fantastic news. And I encourage them to continue that good work. In terms of the recyclability or the recycled content in the FMCG world, 60% already. So that's an incredibly increase if one looks at the last 5 to 10 years in relation to the recycled content. So what about the future challenges? And again, I remind you that FMCG companies are no longer taking a passive approach, and that's good to see that across the world. Certainly the brand leaders, they are building infrastructure for recycling, and that's lacking in many areas, especially in developing nations. And there's more building programs for recovery capability, not to forget gasification and pyrolysis as solutions to that. So we need more collaboration with those that are not quite on target. And in the coming years, in the next 3 years, we will be focusing on those organizations, companies, and countries that are not reaching those necessary targets that we need to achieve. And I'll show you at the end of this presentation what I mean by that particular thing. So we need to ensure that the plastic film we are using is monofilm. And the photograph in this particular slide is exactly that. That's a monofilm material. And then packaging converters. What must they do? And they must work with their customers to ensure that they all understand the opportunity and the value that's at stake. They must have a clear and innovative packaging technology roadmap. And thirdly, there must be a methodology to benchmark packaging products. And before I end off, I want to end on this slide, because if you have not remembered anything I've spoken about today, I want you to remember this slide. Let it be ingrained in your brain. Remember that, ingrained in your brain. If we continue on the trajectory that we are in relation to using up our natural resources, we will require just short of 3 Earths, 3 planet Earths by 2050. You all know there are not 3. We only have 1. If we change our course of direction and implement that which I've touched on in this presentation, and we meet our 2025 targets around the world and 2030 targets around the world, by 2050, in time for our children and grandchildren, we will be back on 1 Earth required in terms of our natural resources. Thank you.
Oh, that was excellent, Pierre. Thank you so much for that summary. Really found it enjoyable, and I certainly hope all of the participants to this session this morning are noting questions. We're going to have a really solid Q&A session afterwards, so please note your questions now. Put it onto the log it, please, in the Q&A section, and I'll ensure that those questions go to each of the presenters when we get to the Q&A session. So thank you very much, Pierre. Ladies and gentlemen, the next presenter in this topic of how to achieve global and regional packaging targets for the Asian region, it's most appropriate that we invite Henki Wibawa from the Executive Director of the Indonesian Packaging Federation to the screen. Henki, would you be so kind as to take over now, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph, and thank you to the Australian Institute of Packaging to invite me today to be a speaker on this 2020 Global Forum of ProPack. We used to go to ProPack every time physically, but today the whole event will be virtual, I believe. So I would like to share with you, just a second, where I can share. Yeah. Okay. That I have to go back. Yeah, I would like to share with you.
Got that. Good, Henki. Great.
Yeah. Okay. That is how to achieve packaging target in the ASEAN region. So we're talking about in ASEAN region actually. If we look the ASEAN economic growth upon the global situation today, it's not so bad. Although, of course, the global pandemic situation today hit also in ASEAN. Definitely, the whole numbers on the economic growth has been corrected, definitely. But we're still having the hope and opportunity that this will be changing very soon after we really can overcome the whole pandemic situation. We look at this, the changing in our global packaging market. Pierre has started to talk definitely about the how important is the packaging in the future, especially if we look the whole trend today, urbanization, the young generation, they all are really having the opportunity with the whole internet commerce retailing. The whole fast moving consumer good today that you will really see not only the young people, including me, for example, are going more and more into the internet retailing. Definitely also because of the pandemic situation today, the social distancing. So most of the packaging trend today is regard to the health and safety. That's the first. Definitely, beside the product itself, will not harm our health, but also the packaging itself. This is important. Secondly, as the trend of the economic growth that we are talking before, the whole disposable income increasing, what we call as a purchasing power. That make us very much positive thinking in the future. And then number three that Pierre also already raised up regarding the environmental issues. How about the sustainability of packaging and recycling? That is the most of the trend of the global packaging today. So the fast-moving consumer goods, including the packaging, having the trend of these four categories, I would say. The functionality. First, how the quality of the pack integrity. That is very much important. And then secondly, because of our way of life today, the lifestyle today, we need more convenience. And then regarding the whole delivery services and so on, we need also the shelf life, especially for the food and beverage product. The shelf life is very much important. And then regarding the customization, today packaging become a media of promotion. The brand awareness is directly from the packaging. The packaging is become more smarter. You are able then to do it for the authenticity, for example, for the to anti-counterfeit, for example, and then traceability. Traceability is very much important, especially for the product like premium product and pharmaceutical product, health product, and so on. That you need the traceability. And then, of course, again, the branding. So many kind of products today you can find on the retail. And then regarding costs, definitely all the time. I've been more than 30 years in this packaging business. All the time, from time to time, we have to look how to reduce our costs, because the competitiveness is a very much important, how to make it more efficient. And not least is what we are talking about, how about the social environment. So this is how we need to really minimize our packaging in volume and in weight. But the functionality will not reduce at all. So the whole supply chain resilience today is all about how about the raw material. The raw material are so many kind of raw material development today to make it the functionality of a packaging before I'm talking is really worthful. They're really valuable. The whole regarding how about the safety stock, how about the protect end-to-end, this whole supply chain. And then we're talking about the brand owners, the converters, and the retailers. The whole value chain should be really managed, but we have the possibility with that, with the whole digital solution today, the technology today that make it possible in order to fulfill the whole requirement today. And the requirement is getting more complex. How you to print it, the packaging, yeah? Is there a need of this market, for example? How much should I sell for it? And this is all in the technology. The digital solution today make it possible. So how to make the customer experience, how to make it the operational process efficient and effective, how to make the business model totally. That is, we are really having the whole tools today. And the trends in the packaging market today, I came up in a 6 main point. All the time to make it better. To make it better means the whole functionality meet to each of the single product that you have to pack. And then faster. The young people today is a multitasking. They don't have much time, even for eat, even for drink. Everything is getting faster. So what the way they do shopping today, I pay today, I buy today, and I consume today. So the single portion of flexible packaging is so important. Packaging must have a function of the transport and can even represent point of sale. So you need a smarter packaging in order that really can really doing the track and traceability. So all the way, the packaging will give the information not only to the consumer, but also back to the manufacturer. The health concern is increasing, as I mentioned earlier. So healthcare packaging, a fast-growing sector, for example. So the packaging should be also safer. It might not harm our health. I'm, as a manufacturer, for example, I'm also a consumer. That is so important. So food safety fears increasing. So we need more and more so-called transparent packaging. And that's possible. Possible with the whole material development, with the whole technology today. And brand conscious, low cost, and sustainable packaging. So that made it cheaper and greener. That is all the packaging market trend today. So the major change driver you will see today, the whole opportunity is going, as I mentioned before, to e-commerce or mobile commerce, we call it, and then going to automation. Today, I still remember all from my manufacturing experience in the past. You can really all try day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year, how to really reduce our waste, because waste is the cost. The raw material cost in a packaging is about 50 to 70%. So the waste of the material that you manufacture is so important. So you can do that by automation, for example. But sometimes, if based on my experience, if human touch a lot in there, then a lot happening is a human errors. So that is why we need to call the Industrial 4.0. That is not only kind of real-time control that you are making, but also that you can really analyze, review the whole manufacturing supply. And this is a good solution today. And the whole digital solution today, the transformation, what we call the digital transformation, making it happen, including the whole customer experience and digital payment and so on. I think this is my last slide, and I believe that we can have later on discussion based on the Q&A that will happen today. Thank you very much.
Oh, Henky, thank you so much. That was a great presentation, and certainly those emphasis on the digital side of the packaging I found most interesting. And I certainly hope all of the participants have taken some key points that they want to develop out of that presentation, and we'll get to those with the Q&A session very shortly. That's not what I wanted to show. Lovely picture, but not what I wanted. Let's try one more time. Sorry, Henky. I'm not having very much success here, am I? That's dreadful. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Where's it gone to? I've lost it. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I'm having connection issues here with this with the Zoom. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you, Rob.
Thank you, Hanky. Thank you for that response. I appreciate that.
I think your presentation is already on screen now.
It is, with my face on it?
Yes.
Correct.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
So just go down the bottom right corner, Ralph.
Yes, I'm onto that, Nerida. All right. Apologies for that interruption, ladies and gentlemen. Purely my error. Okay. Thank you, Henky, who's given us a theme that's come from Indonesia. Now my focus for the rest of this presentation, before we get to the questions and answers, is providing you with a view from the Australian and New Zealand perspective. Two very different markets, certainly from Indonesia, but we certainly still have our significant challenges on meeting packaging targets. If I may, as this is the first session of ProPack this year, I'll take the opportunity of introducing the Australian Institute of Packaging. We're a not-for-profit organisation here in Australia and have members across New Zealand and the region. We've been in existence for over 55 years. We're not linked to any governments. We don't have corporate interests involved. Our purpose is purely packaging education and training. And you can see that we are linked to both the World Packaging Organisation and the Asian Packaging Federation. Australia does have packaging targets. And this slide, sorry?
Sorry to interject there. Your slides are not moving.
Okay, they're moving entirely on my screen, Pierre, so that's where I'm challenged. Thank you.
Ralph, Informer Thailand will share your screen and
Thank you.
change the slides for you if easier.
Thank you. Informer, I'm on to slide 4, please. That's it. Thank you very much. Gee, you jumped on that really quickly and efficiently. Thank you. I'll let you you proceed on. Thank you. These are the Australian 2025 national packaging targets, ladies and gentlemen. They are implemented in approximately 2018, and they are the cornerstone of the actions being conducted in Australia. And you might find a number of similarities here with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation in the United Kingdom. Certainly, our target is 100% of packaging to be reusable, recyclable, or compostable. And that's certainly going to be a considerable challenge, particularly the compostable nature of this, because we are not, at this point in time, don't have any packaging compostable facilities operational in this country. The next challenge is plastic recycling, an average of 50%, and a phase out of problematic and unnecessary single-use plastic packaging. An interest for our state governments, as there's varying legislations being implemented now. And in fact, South Australia will come into play in January of 21, where a number of items will be banned. Next slide, please, Informer. Thank you. So how big a challenge do we have in front of us here in Australia? The score lines in those circles at the top are from results that were taken across industry in 2017 and 18. I do believe these figures will be updated shortly and probably within the month from the authorities to show what progress we've made. But as you can see across all packaging, the target of 100% at 88, not so bad. I think we're getting there. A couple of years to go. We should go very close. However, the next story is not good. With a target of 70% for plastics, and we were at 16%. The challenge there is enormous and is a real challenge to all avenues of the packaging industry in Australia. The actual average component was originally 30%, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, but that survey demonstrated we'd already exceeded it, so they kindly upped the target to 50%. And we've already mentioned the aspect about the problematic and unnecessary single use. So if we'd move on to the next slide, please. And here's pretty much the history of it. I mentioned APCO there. That's the Australian Packaging Covenant Organisation, who have the overriding authority for implementing these national packaging targets across Australia. I think the key factor that does concern me that here we are in 2020, yes, it's still less than 5 years away, and for the degree of challenge in front of us, as demonstrated by the previous slide, it's a significant effort's going to be required across Australia to meet those targets. Next slide, please. We're going to spend a moment here because most of you who'd be watching and listening will be packaging technologists, someone intimately involved with the industry. So where can we work? What can packaging technologists do? How can businesses change? Well, this waterfall technique demonstrates that we unfortunately generate about 5.4 million tonnes of packaging onto the market, but only 2.7 million actually gets recycled, like 50%. So where does it go? Where's that other lost 50%, which is so enormous? And the first one indicates that about 12% is simply not recyclable by design. And that's back to packaging technologists and the suppliers of packaging materials to industry, where we have to revisit the kind of materials that we're using to find ones that are recyclable by design. And that may be simply to make packaging simpler. not be so complex in your different choices and having multiple packaging materials involved with the one unit. The next significant, and at 32%, is quite massive, isn't it? It's simply not collected for recycling. Now, there's many areas of attention here. Some could be in the labelling. Do you actually tell your consumers correctly how to dispose of it? And I'll touch on actions taken there shortly. And the other issues there are simply littering and the like. So we have a significant challenge there. The last one, lost in the recovery process. That's certainly how do our recycling facilities work? And quite frankly, they're reasonably simple, but massive enterprises. And if we haven't designed the materials to get through those facilities, it simply does get lost. It might be the wrong colour, wrong material, wrong shape, wrong size, too big, too little. And we'll touch on that shortly. Next slide, please. I guess this is a more of a plug for the AIP. What are we doing about it? Well, these are just photos from various training courses that we've conducted both in Australia and New Zealand to folk in industry, demonstrating how we can change packaging design and choices of materials to achieve those goals. Next slide, please. From a strategic overall program, who's doing what? Well, in Australia, at the top left, the Australian Packaging Covenant Organisation certainly administers the program and does significant factors to it. Prep Design provides a software tool which packaging technologists can use that simulates the recycling systems and helps them design better options. We have a uniform labelling program that's being implemented across the country to communicate to consumers on how to do it. And may I say last, but clearly the most important, the Australian Institute of Packaging, it delivers on training to meet these targets and educates folk in industry in how to use all of these tools to meet the objective. Next slide, please. This just one slide is actually perhaps the most powerful slide in the entire deck, ladies and gentlemen, where it communicates to technologists such as yourselves when designing packaging or redesigning, if the case may be, what are the reasons that an item is not recycled? Is it because it's colour? Certainly in some rigid plastics, if it's black, the scanning equipment simply doesn't see what resin it is and it goes straight through to landfill. But if it was clear and it was PET or HDPE, it would clearly be recovered and recycled. The choice of adhesives, if the label retains adhesion to the container, or if the label's so big that the sorting equipment can't see the material underneath, it's a problem. It goes through to landfill. If the inks are solvent-based, we have issues of contaminating the system, and its preference obviously for water-soluble. Its weight, if it's too big, it just won't go through. If it's too small, it either gets blown away or falls through the cracks. So key factors there of size and shape are really important. It's quite a complex issue, not enough time to discuss it today, but clearly that's a key area. The other facet here in the middle, this is part of the consumer labelling program, uniform across Australia, which I'll discuss in the next couple of slides. Thank you. Next one, please. For those who the Australian Packaging Covenant Organisation, it's an overarching body and it's responsible for these targets. For signatories to that covenant, they have access to this PREP portal, which actually mimics the performance of materials through a waste sorting facility, but also if it's collected, how's it used? That's the first part. But it also, in the labelling, is the second part. We have a curbside collection process across Australia, and the proportion of the population with access to that will handle those is critical to getting the appropriate certifications. Next slide, please. Through use of that tool, technologists are able to determine what is the appropriate label that can be applied to the packaging format. And this is what it looks like. So key things, the one on the tub, it's indicates being fully recyclable into your curbside. The one in the middle, well, things have got to be done to that particular material. In this case, you've got to scrunch it up into a ball so it will go through, but it's still recyclable. And of course, the one on the right, quite clear, not recyclable. So both illustration and terminology, we're looking for uniform application of this labelling system across the country, as distinct from the hundreds of the other options which are presently there, which cause outright confusion everywhere. Next slide, please. Thank you. Quite straightforward here. Right label, right bin. It gets to that significant 30-odd% of our waste, which doesn't get collected because people don't know where to put it, or they get confused, or the like. What does that labelling look like in reality? Will be seen on the next slide, please. Here's a case in point. It's on the outer wrap of this particular tub. You can see that both the tub, the lid and the sleeve, they're all recyclable, but the foil, it has to be scrunched up into that little ball in order for it to be detected at the sorting facility. Next slide, please. The brand Woolworths here is one of our major retail chains across Australia, and they've made significant commitments to the 2025 national packaging targets. So much so that they're now using their packaging formats as an advertisement to promote the actual recyclable qualities here. And you can see the different labels as far as the techniques. And this particular one would have replaced a black plastic tray, which would not have been recyclable. But the key aspect here, it isn't just a packaging exercise, it's a consumer relationship exercise, and it adds to the saleability of that particular product. Next slide, please. Here's just a general assortment of items commonly purchased where the labels are being picked up. Now, the total number, if a supermarket in Australia handles about 30,000 SKUs, it's considered now that at least a quarter to a third of all products in major supermarkets have this label, and it's continuing to increase on a weekly basis. Next slide, please. One of the, and as I stated earlier, the most contentious issues in this country is regarding the recycling of, excuse me, of flexible plastics. We have here a program where those plastics are returned to store, back to the supermarkets, if you will. They're collected and sent to this business called Red Cycle, where these plastics are in fact repurpose them, if you will, rather than recycle them. And they're into building materials and the like, some samples of which I'll show you on the next slide. No, what I'll show you here is an example of what that actual description is and how it's identified on pack. Next slide, please. These two young fellas are sitting on a rather colourful park bench, but that bench is made of recycled plastic, if you see here. This is a car stop that you'd use in a car park. This is a garden edging, all of which are made out of recyclable materials. There is a very, very long list of what they're using there, but having used it, that bench will never require painting and it will not crack and split like timber. So there's many advantages in using these materials in various facilities. Next slide, please. All right, I've focused to date on Australia. I certainly can't leave out our friends in New Zealand. And their program is similar but different to Australia, and they have slightly different targets, which we'll list on the next slide, please. But you'll notice that many of these are quite recent, 2019, this year, and 20. There's certainly a very progressive thought process going on in New Zealand. There are a lot of programs getting on there, And certainly the culture in New Zealand towards recycling and minimising waste aspects is particularly strong. Next slide, please. If you are in fact selling products to New Zealand, I think it's very appropriate that you follow up on those particular legislations. There are in fact 4 very active organisations or associations in New Zealand who are involved with this, and this is a typical collection point found in New Zealand in both English and Maori. If you move on to the next slide, please. Certainly the circular economy thinking I find is much stronger in New Zealand than it is in Australia. The recovery of soft plastics is quite aggressive. At this stage, I believe it covers about 60% of both the North and South Island, but mostly through the major metropolitan areas. But they do have a significant program there. Next slide, please. So how do packaging technologists go about meeting these particular targets? Certainly from an Australian point of view, and for those who are members of APCO, they published the Sustainable Packaging Guidelines, which I'd strongly recommend to any listeners who can gain access to it, as it's an excellent checklist over that will take you often several years to work through, but a very strong guide on how do you actually achieve those requirements. Next slide, please. Now, these guidelines are simply to move your packaging principles into the right areas of business, to achieve the optimal outcomes for functionality and get the company that you're working for to meet those particular targets. If you move on to the next and second and last slide, there are 10 of these sustainable packaging and principles, ladies and gentlemen. Each of them has a story to work through for each particular material and format that you're working with. It's very comprehensive, but a very thorough approach to it, and I strongly recommend it. That completes my presentation, and I'd like to now turn this over to you, ladies and gentlemen, to start your question and answer sessions or raise items in the through the chat box. Thank you for Pierre for coming back online. And ladies and gentlemen, do I have some questions, please? All right, then I'll find some to certainly work with. Inky, if I could start with you, if you wouldn't mind, please, and I'm sure we'll stimulate some questions from. We've got a significant audience here, by the way, so that perhaps they're just warming up in the early morning in Bangkok. What would it take for new packaging roles to arise in the FMCG supply chain digital landscape? Would you like to develop that point for me?
Well, thank you, Ralph. That was my presentation today. I think the digital transformation is so important. I was talking about the customer experience is one side, the brand awareness that is so important using with the whole digital tools today. And then in the operational process I'm talking about regarding the what we call manufacturing execution system. Today you are able then to do it the whole processing from beginning, from the pre-press, for example, to make the design of printing, up to the delivery and the warehouse system and so on. That is the whole model that will really giving what we call the supply chain landscape changing or resilience. That is the in a fast-moving consumer good is so important today, and we are able then to really doing that with the whole digital tools available today. I think so.
Thank you very much. Pierre, one for you, please. How important is sustainability and recycling to the World Packaging Organisation?
The simple answer is very, like 100%, 110%. But I know that doesn't suffice. You know, some years ago, probably 3 years plus ago, it was such an important aspect to the WPO that we created a portfolio specifically for sustainability and put in place infrastructure around resourcing it and ensuring that we have a vice president that runs that particular portfolio. This all came about when Messenger Soroff, went down the path of food waste. Now, you might say to me, hang on, I asked you about sustainability and recyclability. The two are not quite divorced. And they're actually a bit of a partnership between those, because the packaging aspect is directly related to food, because we can protect, according to UN, up to 25%. So at the moment, our waste in food is around 35%, roughly. And somewhere between 30 and 35. Some countries as bad as 50 and some as low as 25. So the UN has sort of come up with a figure about 35. They predict that packaging can fix 25% of that problem. That means we're only wasting 10%. Now, that opens up a whole forum of discussion, I'm sure. But it does mean that at least packaging goes a long way in solving those problems of food waste. However, and to add on to what Henke has said in his presentation, and what you indicated, what was happening in Australia and New Zealand, if we're using packaging for that food to eliminate that 25%, what sort of packaging are we using? Are we using recyclable packaging that is sustainable? That is the question. And so we need to target very specifically and focused. And in my presentation, I focused on what converters were doing. I focused on what FMCG were doing. I focused on brand owners, and I focused on what the WPO was doing. So it's really a collective approach.
Yeah.
And remember, when I say WPO, then they're the likes of yourself, Ralph, in the AIP down there in Australia. You guys are doing great work in that field. If we talk Indonesia, and Henke represents Indonesian Packaging Federation, and they are doing some work there, and the WPO is working very closely with them in particular areas of trying to eliminate packaging waste, but make it more recyclable. So I think that paints a picture that this is a big focus. We live, sleep, breathe, eat sustainability in WPO.
Thank you, Pierre. And thank you for that lead in regarding sustainable packaging and food waste and the challenge, the balancing between those two. So to all of the participants, I'd just alert you that tomorrow afternoon, Bangkok time, we have another seminar on how to balance sustainable packaging and food waste targets that's starting at 3 p.m. Bangkok time. So really look forward to you joining us on that occasion to develop that point that Pierre just made there. I've got one question here online that I would hope you two speakers can assist me with. And it's very simply, what's the state of chemical recycling in ANZ? My exposure to date is it's virtually zero at this particular time. Have I read about possible investments in a couple of locations in Australia? Yes, but I'm not aware of any commercially operating facilities at this time. Pierre, can you shed any light on that particular question from Rob Field?
Yes, I can. It's a hot topic of late. When I say of late, I'm talking about the last couple of months. And when I'm finished my answer, I'd like to then move on to Henki, because I know Henki has some input on this matter as well.
Good.
And we've in fact had some discussions, him and I, on this topic. So within the WPO countries, so we're looking at 60 countries, there are a host of countries currently that are focusing on chemical recycling. It does seem to be gaining a fair amount of momentum in recent months, and probably folk have had time to think more about it during COVID. So has it been around in the past? Yeah, sure. But has it really got some traction? The answer is yes, in the last 8 months. So I can see whatever next year holds, and none of us know what it holds in relation to COVID-19. However, I can foresee a number, probably more in the developed countries, bringing through this chemical recycling aspect more so than we've seen in the last 10, 15 years. You would remember, Ralph, and Henki as well, these were things that we learned, back in university in the 80s, some of us in the late 70s. But it was there. We've just never really made it, what's the word, not economically viable, but
Yes, I think so. But
maybe that was a factor, but it's becoming more of an issue now. So we will see within the next 12 months, we will see that graph really start swinging up.
Henki, if we can throw that same question across to you, but if you wouldn't mind put in just a comment regarding, does it compete against the crude oil price around the world, for which many of the base resins originate from? Henki, over to you.
Yes, thank you. In fact, I just based on my last study regarding the chemical recycling, for the time being, I believe that is the challenge, and I believe this is also the future. But unfortunately, the economy scale is not there, as you mentioned. Comparing with a virgin plastic, which is in regards to the crude oil price so low today. And if you recycle from the waste, the whole supply chain is also a matter of the cost, how to collect, how to wash, and so on and so on. So the whole supply chain value is still not there in that particular. But I believe that could be really in the future will be overcome. Definitely the economy of scale are there, and that is the best solution, because we are not talking only about the waste management today, we are talking about the resources management. Don't forget, we are not talking only about the post-consumer waste, but the whole environment. So the life cycle assessment is so important today, talking about the carbon footprint, the emission, the energy consumption, and so on and so on. That's what we have to look at. And that is, I believe, in the future is so important. And talking about the supply chain of the waste management as well, I really want to add on that. You raised up already, Ralph, before regarding the whole how to make the waste stream with the coding system and so on. And I believe, again, I come back with the digital solution today with the track and traceability that also make it more efficient in order really to bring up in the right waste stream and reduce the whole cost and the whole supply chain. That's my opinion.
Well, thank you very much, Henki. Well, you're actually quite a popular man here, because the next question has been directed to you, and it reads as follows. Do you think we can produce food-safe products without using plastic packaging?
Well, okay. Again,
That's
this is
a good question, wasn't it?
That's a good question, definitely. Yeah. Again, people are talking a lot regarding back to the paper, but unfortunately, paper, in terms of especially talking about the food food a long shelf life. There's no barrier properties in the paper. But today, what we found out is also quite making that kind of structure is not sustainable, because you're combining between the paper and the plastic in order to really improve in terms of barrier, and especially also in the what anti-water, anti-oil, and so on. But in the future, I believe that definitely is some possibility to improve with the coating material, which is a bio-based coating material, that in order that you really can improve the properties, the mechanical properties and the chemical properties of the paper, in order also make it recyclable. I believe that is what we expect in the future, that really to make it also a food safe packaging, but also recyclable. That is my my idea.
It's a really tough question, and thank you, Justine, for raising it. I think I personally find that, because I work in the food industry all the time, that to me is still the most challenging one of the lot, because plastics, the right plastic and the right application is clearly at times the most sustainable option of the like. While consumer opinion may not follow that, but the realities of it is. So great question. And perhaps you'd like to come online tomorrow and we'll have a further discussion on that point. Pierre, I'd like to send you the next question from Suhas, is how do we focus on reducing packaging in the first place? Can we have something like returnable water gallon bottles for other deliveries, especially to home? Would you like to have a comment to that one, please?
Thank you. There are two parts to that question. How do we reduce packaging? I think was from memory.
Yeah. How do we focus on reducing packaging in the first place? Yes.
Let me focus on that part first, because when one looks at the very first slide that I had in my presentation, which was the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and that is a disaster, no matter how you want to look at it. And so how do we ensure that we do not create another Great Pacific Garbage Patch? And that is a number of things. Number one, in my opinion, is that, and I'm basing this on my experience of traveling across the world before COVID-19 and seeing what the different countries are doing and the issues that they are having and the comments that they are making. And it's clear to me that we have an education issue. Oh, yeah. Now, you know, we're sitting in this forum, we're educating ourselves. The three of us whose faces are on the screen, we are being educated as well, as much as we're educating others. And it's not only sitting in a classroom environment being lectured on that is education. This is, you know, attending seminars, reading magazines, you know, stuff you see on the television regarding plastics and recycling and stuff like that. It's all part of education. But the key issue is, and I'll be discussing this in a paper that I'll deliver tomorrow, and that is educating from grassroots level. It's not educating the likes of Henki Mabawa or Ralph Moyle, who are in excess of 50 years old, because to change your ideas and your opinions, I can't really. You formulated your opinions, but if I educate a grade 1 or a grade 2 or a grade 3, believe me, that young child, and I'm talking here from experience because I've done it, and I can convince them about doing the right thing with the packaging, because they will influence their grandfathers and their grandmothers And believe me, those of you who have grandchildren, you know how they do influence you. And so that, I believe, is key to ensure that we start educating at that young age across the schools across the world. Because it's not the packaging that is the problem. If I read into that question, and I may be wrong, but if I read into that question, and I thank the person who sent that question in, because it is valid. But in many times, they are seeing the packaging as the problem. In my presentation and in the presentation that both of you did, both of you alluded to the fact that packaging is important for our lifestyles. We're living in the 21st century. We cannot go back to the mid 1700s and mid 1800s. We cannot. It's not possible. So because we're living in the environment that we are, and we are requiring, our lifestyle is a fast changing lifestyle. We want food on the run, all these sort of things. Packaging can provide that, and that's good. So what do we need to do? We need to do the right thing with the packaging when we remove the contents. And that is everyone in this forum. Everyone needs to have a look at themselves and see, where are they using excessive packaging that was not really necessary? I'll give you an example. I was at the shop yesterday and I bought some tomatoes. Now, in a normal scenario, those tomatoes, you would take a bag off a reel and then you put 4 tomatoes in there, or 6 tomatoes, or whatever the case might be. The question is that bag necessary? Why can't you put your 4 tomatoes directly into your basket that you brought from home? That's just a simple, that's just one example. Look at your whole way of doing things. We need to change our culture and our way of doing things.
Thank you. So first, I would just add to that, reducing packaging. A lot of the conversation we've had here today is on recycling. And yes, it's important, but it's not the first thing you do. It's not the second thing you do. It's in fact way down the list, because actually it's a very expensive and reasonably inefficient process. My recommendations to packaging technologists out there, you need to re-look at the light weighting of packaging, but it still has to fulfill its function. And where possible, reuse it. Now, I appreciate, Subhas, in your example, you're talking about food, and there's quite a contentious area there regarding food hygiene and risk to the food, which certainly can't be avoided. But in general terms, you can always reduce and reuse before you recycle. Some further questions here, and seeing I've been deflecting it to you two gentlemen, it's about time I actually did some work. Hitesh has asked us a question. Do the packaging targets apply to companies selling finished goods and products imported into ANZ rather than manufacturing them? Quite clearly, yes. If not the company itself, but certainly its local agent is held accountable for the packaging being sold in this country, no matter where it originates from. So a very clear yes to that. And you came up with a second one. Is there any certification requirements in ANZ from a safety point of view before using recycled content in food products? Absolutely. You won't find it actually in packaging regulations, you'll find it in food regulations. FASANS is the organisation which controls so much of the legislation in this area in both Australia and New Zealand. They have very strict guidelines. Think food safety risks, mineral oil migration and others. So there is quite a significant thing. Best solution to is check with supplier. They need to pass what's called the food contact certification for that particular material or product is the simplest answer to your question. There's a question that's actually come up to all participants, and it's quite a teasing one. How can we increase recyclability awareness to consumers / brand owners where the government is not so supportive at the moment? Look, I'll go first and then I'll hand to Henke. It is a challenge where the consumers see value and do that through the promotion. I had a slide there on Woolworths and how they use their tray for meat. It was no longer just a tray to hold meat, which it does do, but they converted the whole pack of it into instructions and guidelines. It actually enhances the brand's prestige and awareness and sensitivity. And to the best of my knowledge, their sales in that has gone particularly well. Henky, do you have a comment on that question?
Yes, in fact, this is what I think Pierre has already started to talk about this matter. At present, with the support of WPO, we are trying to work here in Indonesia to make a guideline of the packaging design and recycling, which is true. The matter, we need that guideline because from the government side, which is true, that the question before, we are not really, based on my many years experience again, not really get the, how is that, a solution support actually, yeah. So either they don't have any right policy in this matter, or they are not understand so very well. I think the base is to make that guideline, and the guideline is not only talking about the packaging design and the infrastructure, how to make it there, but also the education, as mentioned. So education is one important thing, and I believe today we are seeing the opportunity that all of the multinational brand owners are really having all the pledges, as mentioned also before, with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation pledges. I believe that they're really having that kind of the so-called the extended producer's responsibility, and also the plastic recovery organization, consortium, and so on. And usually that brand owner, based on that program, they're also having a funding for that. So we need also funding in this matter. The education, funding, this is the whole points that we need to make in the guideline. And I believe that that is the first step in a positive way that we can do. But again, we need collaboration of the whole stakeholders, really moving forward with this kind of program and project. Thank you.
Thank you, Henky. Pierre, can you have a quick answer to that? Because I'm just acutely aware that we're getting to the end of our allotted time for this program.
There are many countries around the world where the governments are not supporting these recycling programs. If one looks towards the European structure, and Henk is 100% correct there, the producer responsibility aspect, that is key, and that is really, really helpful. So the producer who is responsible for that particular packaging coming onto the market, therefore that producer has to take ownership in terms of recycling. And that's legislated. So the amount of material going into that plant is measured against the amount that is recycled. And if that is beyond a certain figure, obviously agreement between them and the government, if you are beyond that figure that's allowed, you're fined. And in that way, you remember the slides I put up of those of 3 Earths? We have to be really firm on this for us to get to a point in 2050.
Thank you, Pierre. I have one specific one here from Nan. And either you gentlemen could help me here, but I'll also have a go. Could you tell me what material can be used to packaging nuts, which have a great deal of oil? Jagan, I understand the sensitivity here, and I think you actually raise a really good point of choosing the most appropriate packaging material for the intended purpose of the product that it's there to protect. The protection is a key factor for packaging. The oil content, you're worried about oxidization or rancidity, which is due to oxygen getting to the oil, so therefore your material must protect it. So yes, you could use a can, but the consumer can't see it. Yes, you could use a jar with appropriate seals on it, mind you, or you could consider multi-layered laminate plastic, which is soft, very inexpensive, and with the appropriate barriers, say an EVOH, would provide you with quite reasonable shelf life at a very inexpensive price. But there's a kind of decision tree from my comment. Pierre or Henke, would you like to pass comment on Nagan's question there? And we might just call that the last of the questions for this afternoon.
Yeah,
Henke,
maybe.
you go.
Thank you. Maybe I can give this is own experience. It's also now.
Oh, please, that'd be great.
I believe, as mentioned before, that oil content of product like nuts and so on. I believe we need oxygen barrier in order to prevent the oxidation and rancidity. That is so important. And of course, we need a barrier material. I'm talking about the flexible packaging here. The barrier material, and usually we use aluminum foil and we use metallized at least, but in that particular structure, I believe is not really at this moment as a good recyclability. That is the whole challenge. But today, there's a new possibility that also making the whole six pinpoints requirement that we need to do in the packaging today is making it fast, cost effective, directly using a multi-layer film, let's say 7 layers at least, I believe, with EVOH. EVOH is the best material today that for the oxygen barrier, and you can straight away, and also that question that I saw on the Q&A from the Philippines, like here in Indonesia, for the small medium enterprises, they're really having the problem today going into the conventional converters for the minimum order quantity. But today, with that straightforward, with the kind of multi-layer blown film, EVOH PE base, and then directly going into the digital press, digital print, here one company and able to supply for the small, medium enterprises with a minimum order of 100 pieces of standing pouches with the digital prints directly. So 100 pieces. You said it's a cost, very, very costly. Not at all. If you compare with that conventional way you do to prepare for that particular. I believe that this is a solution.
Thank you. There's a question there from Annette. I'll ask when I hand over to Nerida Kelton very shortly. Nerida, if you could please address Annette's question in your response, please. Ladies and gentlemen, we're drawing to an end. Thank you very much for your participation. My sincere thanks to both wonderful presenters, Professor Pierre Pienaar, President of the World Packaging Organization, and Mr. Henke Weber from the Indonesian Packaging Federation. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and your contribution and for answering the really interesting questions that came from the audience today, which was just absolutely wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, there are a number of questions that came up there regarding sustainable packaging and food waste during the course of this presentation and the Q&A session. I remind you that tomorrow afternoon, 3 p.m. Bangkok time, we'll be doing another forum of this nature titled How to Balance Sustainable Packaging and Food Waste Targets, which I think for those of you who have this challenge, and that's many of us, I hope you really will enjoy that particular session. So thank you very much for your time. I'd like to hand over now to Nerida Kelton to close out this particular session. Nerida, over to you.
Thank you, Ralph. I'll let you ask that question because there are so many questions here.
Oh, there are. All right,
sorry.
well, I'll read it to you then. Can there be an award system on the best practice per country on the best waste management, recycling system, so that other countries can also see the advance and can also implement in their respective countries? So thank you, Annette, for that question.
Annette, thank you very much. It's one of my favourite questions today because, yes, the answer is absolutely, categorically, 100% yes. The majority of World Packaging Organisation member countries and member associations have either local, domestic or regional awards programs. So I would encourage you to go onto the World Packaging Organisation website. There is a list, and Pierre, correct me if I'm wrong, would be approximately 50 countries that are already registered with their local awards programs, and at least 50% of those actually have sustainable packaging design as its own regional or local award category, which then actually feeds in as an exclusive feeder program into the World Star Awards. So again, if you have an opportunity, have a look on the Australian Institute of Packaging website. Our local Australia and New Zealand awards program is called the Australasian Packaging Innovation and Design Awards, and we have a fabulous category, Sustainable Packaging Design, and there's at least 4 years of best practice examples of remarkable innovations that are happening here, and then obviously linking back into some amazing innovations globally. So again, answer is yes, and I encourage everybody that's listening today to look at your local program and actually start entering your awards. So I would like to close today's session. Thank you very much for being a part of our first ever virtual edition of the Global Packaging Forum. Thank you, obviously, huge thank you to Hanky, Pierre and Ralph for remarkable presentations. We really do appreciate your time today, and as always for supporting the AIP. For those who are going to join us for the rest of the week, the next one, our next session is tomorrow at 3 p.m. Bangkok time. So that is for any Australians, just to help you, 7 p.m. Daylight saving time, 3 p.m. Bangkok time. You can register online, and that is how to balance sustainable packaging and food waste targets. Now, before I close, there is also a virtual ProPack exhibition, and I'll just ask Informa to pop the link into the chat function. So there is an online virtual version of ProPack Asia happening right now, and it started this morning. It runs all the way through to the 25th. Please use the link or jump on the ProPack Asia website and go and visit all of the exhibitors that are either virtual or physically in Thailand. So there's some fabulous innovations and exhibitors ready to meet you. So we would encourage everybody to join the virtual exhibition if you can't actually attend in person in Thailand. So thank you very much for joining us for our first session. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow, and stay safe and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.